This is the Livin' It podcast, featuring the CEO of the Richmond Flying Squirrels, Todd Parnell. After 30-plus years in minor league baseball, he knows a few things.
Remember, I'm a product of the North Carolina public school system, Anthony. We're 48th in the country, but we won't even talk about that.
And a few people.
It's not name-dropping if you actually know the person. Like I was telling Tiger Woods the other day that I don't think is name-dropping.
Now he's telling all, unfiltered.
I used to go absolutely
From the Reckless Kelly tour bus to the Sandbridge Bar and NASCAR tailgates.
1, 2, Earnhardt 4.
He's always living it. Here's the host of the Livin' It podcast, Anthony Opperman.
Squirrels Nation, Podcast Nation, welcome back to the Livin' It podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Opperman, alongside the big guy, the one, the only, the CEO of the Flying Squirrels, the president of the Montgomery Biscuits. I fit it in that time.
Oh, yeah.
Todd Parnell.
Well, hello, Anthony. Hello, everyone. There's a lot of chaos going on around us, so if this show is even remotely interesting, that'll be amazing. But Oppo and I have, what do we call it? Created boundaries around ourselves. Yeah, that's a therapist word. Boundaries around ourselves, so we can bring you episode number 6. Because, quite frankly, I never thought we'd get this far.
From a new setting, by the way. Good news is baseball season is now upon us here in Richmond, Virginia. The Flying Squirrels are back in town. Bad news is Studio A has been shut down until September. So
right.
Here we are in the corner of Parney's Pub.
And if you want to see all my clothes, they're in my office. You can't hardly move in there. But at least we won't have interruptions from muscle-bound baseball coaches.
There are fringe benefits to this new location, and also some fine autographed memorabilia from our friends at Reckless Kelly, Flying Squirrels pitching coach Steve Klein, among others.
There's a Billy Ripken bat back there, too, for those of you that know what that means. There literally is a Billy Ripken bat. We'll just leave it at that.
I was going to say, good thing that we'll be in this location for the name drop episode, because there'll be plenty of props to use.
There's a Willie Nelson bat here, too. If we're really going to start name dropping, there's a bat signed by Willie Nelson right there. You see it?
I see it, yep.
Now right next to the Billy Ripken bat.
He was the slugger back in his day, Willie, I hear.
He always got caught in the weeds.
Oh, we are off and running. Big guy is in rare form on this episode of the Livin' It podcast. Well, you mentioned we have chaos going all around us with the season fast upon us, big guy. And actually, it's kind of appropriate because today's episode, we're going to talk about building the brand and the early days of the Richmond Flying Squirrels, which were kind of chaotic.
We're going to go back and more chaotic. They're more than chaotic. More than chaotic. I don't even know how to describe what happened. Remember we did a job fair? There was like 3,500 people showed up for jobs. And now, like today, we're like, seriously, part of our day is finding employees because the economy is such a different place now. But yeah, that happened, and just in general, we worked off of, I think we said this on an episode before, we worked off of a card table in the locker room with a red checkered plastic. Remember that thing?
Yep.
It would stick to your arms all the time when you, but we always had a bottle of wine in the middle, and then when we got done our work, we took care of that.
Yes, we did. So Big Guy obviously wanted to focus on the Flying Squirrels.
Focus? You want me to focus?
Well, I didn't want you to focus. We were going to attempt to focus on the Flying Squirrels brand specifically. But before we did that, when you got to Richmond, this wasn't the first place that you went through a rebrand. And I wanted to start there.
I forgot about that, actually.
The very first time you actually went through a rebrand.
In Kannapolis, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we'd mentioned this on previous podcasts. When you got to Kannapolis, the name of the team was the Boll Weevils, which was...
The Piedmont Boll Weevils. Here's an idea. Name your team after an insect that sent the entire region into an economic recession because boll weevils killed the cotton crops. Kannapolis, where we were working, where I grew up in Locust, is a big cotton area, and it killed all the gin mills. So name your team after that.
I was going to say, in terms of building the brand, rule number one, don't name your team after an insect that destroyed the local economy.
And then there's that.
So you inherit the Piedmont Boll Weevils, and what was the process like? So what jump-started that process of, we need to rename this team?
Well, I don't think the community there ever really fell in love with it.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. I mean, the farmers were hacked off.
Yeah. So much for those agriculture nights, by the way.
Yeah. The future farmers of America, not interested.
Yeah.
But we wanted to kind of make our own identity when we came in there and kind of change the culture. And but really, honestly, talk about name drops. The whole key was when we started to get involved with Dale Earnhardt Sr. and when he was interested, and then also Bruton Smith was interested in joining the ownership group. When that happened, that really started the tides towards a rebrand. And then we worked another name drop with legendary NASCAR artist Sam Bass, who's now deceased, on the logo, and that was amazing. So it quickly, Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s involvement and Bruton Smith's involvement with Larry Hedrick, who was my boss and our owner, who just passed away earlier this year, that all really started avalanching very quickly. And then we became the Kannapolis Intimidators.
So you became the Intimidators. I heard an interview with Reed Ryan talking about the Round Rock Express and how they got their name. And they, like the Flying Squirrels, did a name the team contest. They had some choices, but one of the choices was the Express, which was Nolan Ryan's nickname. Right. And he said that while they had a lot of other choices, the city of Round Rock really was kind of pushing them toward the Express because they wanted that association with Nolan Ryan. Was it pretty much obvious that whatever the nickname of the team was going to be was A, going to be racing related, and B, was going to have something to do with Dale Earnhardt to kind of celebrate his ownership of the team?
I don't think we had any other choices.
Yeah.
I don't recall that. I mean, again, that was such a crazy time. I mean,
do you remember what year that was?
That was October of 2000.
So yes, he does.
October of 2000, because we announced it November of 2000. Because we announced it, here's a Parney trick, we announced it at noon via a press release that Dale Earnhardt Sr. was buying into the team because we wanted people to be talking about it around the Thanksgiving table.
I bet they were there too.
And you've heard me say that before. Like, make some big announcements so people talk about it around the Sunday dinner table or the Thanksgiving table. And yeah, that was huge news. Huge news. In retrospect, it would have been even bigger if we would have had time to put together a press conference and all that. But we did that later. And that's actually here in Parney's Pub. That's a picture straight ahead of you of Dale Sr. right outside my office the day we unveiled the logo. But then, of course, he died February 18th, 2001. So all that happened that quickly. He never saw a game as an owner of the team.
You know,
I didn't know that.
I didn't realize that timeline. Yeah. I honestly thought he had been involved with the team earlier. That I had no idea that was right before Daytona.
He never saw a game, and
wow,
those are some of the roller coaster moments of my life. Like I started to think I was pretty good.
Yeah,
at my job,
that's a pretty big deal.
I'm getting Dale Earnhardt Sr. involved in our team, and we're going to name it the Intimidators, and we're going to have all this merchandise. And we had meetings over at Dale Earnhardt Incorporated. I mean, for a little country boy like me to walk in the Garage Mahal, as they called it, and be like an invited guest, that was a pretty big deal. And then February 18th, 2001 happened, and it was literally like everything just went upside down. I mean, we still were involved, but we never had the traction because Dale Sr. wasn't around. Dale Jr. did a bunch of stuff with us, and he was great.
It was different.
Really great. But, and then I moved to Altoona in April after that. So like everything happened really, really quickly. Maybe that's why I'm so messed up. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't dealt with in my life.
Well, yeah, because I was going to ask you, we'll put the branding thing aside for just a second, because I was going to ask you about how you guys honored Dale Sr. going into that season, but
actually, I'm wrong. That was a year later that I left.
Okay,
I left.
So you did have a 1 year
season because we had a night. This is one of the most. I was there the full season. So we did have one night where we were playing the Macon Braves, and we had these Dale Earnhardt. We had these Intimidator jerseys with a number 3 on them, and then we had these Intimidator hats with the K on it that Sam Bassett designed. And there was a TV show on QVC called For Race Fans Only, and they shot their show live from our parking lot.
Oh, wow.
And Dale Jr. came. And we sold like 8,000 hats in like 10 minutes. And it was one of the more amazing things. There was a lot of other things that happened that night that were kind of surreal. Dale Jr. and I drove in this what are those things called that Kyle drives out on the field?
Like a gator?
Gator.
Yeah.
And we drove out on the field for him to speak to the fans in between the third inning. And as he did, it started raining, drizzling, like tears from heaven type stuff.
Yeah.
And then when we got off,
it stopped. Come on.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, that's some pretty heavy stuff right there. Yeah. So, I've only seen Dale Jr. in person like once or twice since then. So, but no, I remember that. Anyway, those are some moments. But that rebranding only lived a lot, like a short percentage of what it could have been.
Without a doubt.
I really think it could have been like the Express.
Right.
The combination of Round Rock and Nolan Ryan, the combination of Kannapolis. There's no one. He was not from Round Rock.
He's not from Round Rock. But look, you don't mess with Texas, and you don't mess with Nolan Ryan, as Robin Ventura found out all too well.
And a few other people that we know. That's one of the things I look back on is that branding. It doesn't always work out. Other things can factor into it.
But who?
like if Dale Sr. would have been around, that would have been an amazing turn of events. But he wasn't, and so it only really, and then they changed it not too long ago to the Cannonballers.
So and hold off on that for just a second, because I do want to get your thoughts on that. But before we get into that part of it, I wanted you to describe the design, like the K design, like what's going on with the logo? What are some of the elements of the logo, and why were some of those choices made?
Well, it's a K for Kannapolis, which is Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s hometown. It has a claw coming out of the top. I'm looking at it over here, everybody. Yep. That's why it has a claw coming out of the K, the top K, and the claw is grasping a baseball. So it's significantly baseball. And then it's got an eye right in the K where the thing goes, like this, whatever you call that. Mm-hmm. And that to me looks really tenacious and fast, sleek. And then there's teeth on the bottom of the K2 for intent. So it's supposed to be fast, supposed to be tough, supposed to be intimidating. Therefore, it was the Intimidators.
Right.
And Dale Sr. actually, along with Joe Hedrick, who I haven't talked to in years and years, who was his marketing guy and the person that I dealt with a lot at Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, they were all behind that with Sam Bass and approved it, and it was an amazing. I knew enough about Sam Bass that I knew that we were dealing with a legend, and so that was a cool process. It would have gone gangbusters if things hadn't have turned out the way they did.
So they did turn out the way they did, but the team was known as the Intimidators for a long, long time until actually 2020 was supposed to be the first year of the rebrand.
It's like 19 years then
with the Cannonballers. Yeah, that's a long run.
When you get as old as me, Anthony, you forget. This has been happening to me all the time lately. I was like, well, that wasn't that long ago. And then you or somebody will say, big guy, that was 8 years ago or 9 years ago, when I think it was like last year. I didn't realize it was 19. And there's some reasons that I wasn't at the table, but there's some reasons that they changed it because of there was some inability to have full use of the Intimidators name and all
which
that
is such a big thing, which is something we're going to talk about when we get into why, the Richmond's team became known as the Flying Squirrels. But, when you heard, though, that they were changing the name from the Intimidators, was there any sentimental draw, or was there? I mean, there was plenty of people in Kannapolis that didn't like it.
Sure. I mean, I understood it. I wasn't mad at it. I mean, I know the people down there. They're always very nice to me. Scotty Brown's a dear friend for a million years, and he's involved in that organization. And I still talk to him, every 3 or 4 months. I think he was just in Richmond not too long ago, but I missed him. But, I got it. I understood it, but that doesn't mean it didn't make me, not sad. I mean, that was a really important time of my life as a person, and a really important time of my life as a professional. A lot of highs and some lows that you just can't imagine. I mean, I can't tell you how many people contacted us after Dale Sr. passed away because we had his name on our team. We had I think I mentioned this one other time. We had one of the public memorial services at our ballpark. It was a crazy emotional time. I mean, I was inside Dale Earnhardt Incorporated looking out at, when you see the 30 for 30 and they show all the people putting the stuff down. I mean, I was there on the inside with Bill Malcolm, who was his director of security, and Joe Hedrick and a bunch of other people looking out at all that. And for a guy like me, coming from North Carolina, to be around the emotional ground zero of that, it was tough, and it was really crazy, and going to the funeral and all that, the one they had that was on TV. It was crazy, but it also taught me how to not live in the moment of what if, right? Like you said, February 18th, 2001 happened. He's gone. That teaches us a lot of lessons too, like the one I told you before about not putting things off because I was around him. I could have gotten some baseball signed, didn't. He never came back. So, don't put stuff off. Live every day. Don't take stuff for granted. All these lessons that events like that, and then just the impact that certain people have on people's lives. I mean, literally thousands of people's lives changed because Dale Earnhardt passed away. It's crazy. Right? Whether it was people that worked at one of the auto dealerships, or whether it was people that worked at the race shop, or, people like me. If Dale Earnhardt Sr. would have stayed alive, would have been alive, and he would have been involved in the team, and we would have gotten to know each other better. I didn't know him great. I knew him, but I didn't know him great. I would have fallen in love with that situation so much that I might not ever have left.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
I might not ever have left. And but
I mean, because on the surface, that looks like the dream scenario, right? That's the newspaper headline, right? It's that's it. Small town boy from North Carolina takes over kind of hometown team. Dale Earnhardt Sr. is the owner. You've got all these amazing opportunities right there, and you're close to home. That's storybook, right?
Yeah, no, and it was great. And Lindsay and Sammy were little, and
had the house on the lake, and
lived on Lake Norman. So all that stuff can be taken away from you in a second. So boy, we've really veered from branding, haven't we? The philosophies of Parney. But yeah, so that was a big thing. I mean, a huge thing. And even now, it's 20 years. Ryan McGee, who I follow a lot on Twitter, and Marty Smith, Marty McGee show. I love those two guys. I've never met them. At least I don't think I have. And they did a lot of stuff on the 20th anniversary. And first of all, I couldn't believe it was 20 years. Again, time is just going by so incredibly fast. But just, they did some things about how things changed, how NASCAR changed. And in essence, again, I was not nearly as close as certainly the family, or a guy like Chocolate Myers, who was his gas guy, or, Larry McRenna, all those people. But just as a person who was around him 12 times in my life, it changed a ton of people. Even people that had never met him this actually is about branding.
Let's go.
Dale Earnhardt, the Intimidator, like that brand. Like he is like, I learned a lot from being around Joe Hedrick and that organization of Dale Earnhardt about branding. I mean, the Intimidator was the public brand of Dale Earnhardt Sr. that made people either fall in love with him and run through a brick wall and get in fist fights at honky tonks all over the world, or they hated him and the same exact thing happened. Like, part of branding something is evoking emotion. The worst thing that can ever happen is you brand something and nobody give a crap about it. That's the worst thing that can possibly ever happen. And that certainly happened here, tying what we're talking about in Kannapolis to here. We evoked a lot of emotions. Not all of it was great, but we got people on the edge of their seat. And that's what Dale Earnhardt Sr. did as the Intimidator. He got people on the edge of his seat. And then some of the other things, like he was crazy. He was smart as a fox. Like the whole like public little thing he had with Jeff Gordon, that's much to do about. I think Ryan McGee did a big story about that. A genius. Like they were business partners.
Yeah.
And the branding that happens in like the WWE and wrestling.
Right. I was just going to say, I mean, it almost is like a wrestling bit, right? Like, you got to have the heel in order to really have the heroine and really make it into something.
Right. And I grew up on that too. And I'm not joking. That stuff made an impact on me later on in life when it comes to branding. Like even my own personal brand, like I grew up watching Nature Boy Ric Flair in his prime. I grew up watching the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, every Saturday, and these guys made their own brand, and, people young and old in the Mid-Atlantic region were connected. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, all those guys. And that's, I think, kind of permeated my brain so that, like, what is your brand, And so, anyway, I'm rambling today because it's chaotic out there, and I want this show to go on as long as I possibly can because I don't want to go back outside these doors, honestly, because it's nuts. It's really nuts.
Well, speaking of nuts, I think that's a perfect way to transition, big guy, into what transpired in Richmond, Virginia in the fall of 2009, going into the spring of 2010. So the team relocates from Norwich, Connecticut. I remember the Baseball is Back press conference here on the main concourse of the Diamond.
Baseball is back!
We're back! Hey, Richmond, we're back!
He says that jokingly because every bar we walked into, we always used to scream.
We told that story on a previous podcast.
Baseball is back!
Yep.
People be like, who the hell are these guys? Who the heck are these guys?
We were these carpet-bagging Yankees. That's what we were.
Speak for yourself. I've never been a Yankee.
Yeah, well, I'm from Texas.
It's his own country, isn't it?
It used to be. Yeah, some people think it still is, for sure. So the team relocates from Norwich. The Baseball is Back press conference, September 23rd, 2009. I remember that because it's my mom's birthday.
Oh, nice. That's why it went so well.
Well, there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. This team had been known as the Richmond Braves for as long as anyone could remember at that point. The stories of I used to go to games at Old Parker Field. I mean, how many times?
If we had a dollar for every time somebody said to us, my dad or my granddad used to take us to games at Old Parker Field, that new ballpark we've been promised for 12 years would be built and would be playing like our 7th season in it already.
No doubt. But I mean, obviously that's the beauty of the game, right? I mean, that's why you get into it. It's the nostalgia and for people to have that connection to it. But that was the history that we were walking into. And I mean, I think it was pretty apparent right out of the gate that while we were going to honor and celebrate that history at some point, that was not the direction that this franchise was going to go in. So when you start going through that branding process, I guess first I want to start here before we talk a little bit more in depth about the process and what led to the team being called the Flying Squirrels. So you went through that process in Kannapolis and the logo design, all that. How, in what ways did it change by the time you got to Richmond in 2009? We're talking 2000 with Kannapolis, so almost 10 years later. how had minor league baseball branding, logo design, nickname changed to that point? Because it changed rapidly over that time.
Yeah, it did. I mean, there were some team names that had gotten out there that were different.
Well, Montgomery Biscuits, perfect example.
That's a perfect example. Yeah, Montgomery Biscuits were hot. The biscuits were hot with their buttery blue color scheme. And that's what it is. It's buttery blue color scheme. But I think I feel like, and I'm not trying to put over importance on us here in Richmond by any, but the Flying Squirrels kind of put it to a whole nother level there for a little bit. I mean, there have been, you're right, a lot of different names, but
Lehigh Valley,
Iron Pigs,
just come out.
I mean, there were a lot of great ones. But in 2010, when we named the team the Flying Squirrels, there had never been a sports team ever in the history of the United States named Flying Squirrels before. Like, ever. There was a team somewhere that were the something Squirrels, but never a team named the Flying Squirrels. So the foundational principles of us were being different, being fun, and being impactful. I think we got the being different right because nobody had ever named a team. So I think, before we had talked about having to have courage when you're doing things like this. And when you're branding something, you can't be afraid of making a mistake. I mean, but once you commit, and what's that old saying? A pig is committed, or a pig's dedicated, but a hog's committed, right? Like you got to be kind of like a hog. You got to be all in whenever you do it. But the process was much different because of who we engaged and the guys that did the work for us. Now called
Brandiose.
Brandiose, yeah.
Yep, they were Plan B branding at that time.
Yeah, they're Plan B branding. They did a bunch of other teams. We had done some work with them in the past. Chuck Domino had done some work with them in the past. And I just remember them sending us so many renderings. And I remember just screaming into the telephone. And I don't know if I can say what I would say on the telephone. It's not cursing. But I would tell them to get more creative by the use of certain things.
Well, okay, before we
that is now legal in some states, including Virginia.
Before we get too deep into the
he's corralling me back. He's corralling me back.
Before we get too deep into the actual design and creation of the Flying Squirrels logo, well, I wanted to talk about how we ended up at Flying Squirrels. So we did the Name the Team contest, which that was a little bit revolutionary. I mean, teams had done it, but
6,000 entries.
Yeah, and then so we had that outpouring of support. I remember going back and looking at the press release, and just still to this day, I'm astonished.
Darren Ravel called.
Right. So, but we did the name the team contest through the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and got 6,000 entries. And then we announced the 5. There was so much uproar over the 5, which were Flying Squirrels, Rockhoppers.
Yeah, you're going to test me here. Flatheads.
Yes.
Hush Puppies.
No, not yet. Not one of the original 5.
Flying Squirrels.
I already said that one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I don't remember.
Flying Squirrels, Rockhoppers, Flatheads, Ham Bones, which was later tossed out. Right. Yeah. And Rhinos.
Oh, yeah, Richmond Rhinos. That was mine. Yeah, I've forgotten it already. I'm so into the Flying Squirrels now. Yeah,
I think on the podcast we could say what your tagline was going to be.
So I wanted to get an actual rhino as a pet, right? An actual rhino, and I wanted our slogan to be Richmond Rhinos. We're horny for baseball. And then every time we scored a run, I wanted the rhino to run out onto the field and circle around and then come back into some unknown place. So that's why when we got a pig, I was
going to say, we ended up with a pig. It was I'm
like, that's nothing. We got a pig. I wanted a rhinoceros. And I still would like to have a pet rhinoceros, to be honest with you.
So, folks, 2009, it was a very different time in our world, as you can probably guess by some of these ideas that were tossed around at the point. So, so we have those 5. There was this huge uproar. Everybody hated all 5 choices. So and Darren Ravel had picked up on kind of he gave
us some more names, too.
He did.
MSNBC.
Yes, that's where he was at the time.
Right.
And he was kind of a sports business reporter. And so he had kind of taken interest in what was happening in Richmond and all of the uproar over these 5 names. Because that was one thing that definitely had changed is I think we all knew going into it, like there was going to be some pushback. And so then we went through him and did an additional contest. Like people could add a wild card entrant into this name the team contest. And so that was with Darren's involvement. That was 9,000. So many that it crashed the servers at CNBC. Like literally, I remember getting a phone call.
MSNBC.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the NBCs.
Isn't that what it was? MSNBC.
Yeah. I remember getting a phone call from Darren Ravel. We were out at the sushi place downtown, or hibachi place downtown. And I remember he's like, we got so many submissions that it crashed.
Was it Kobe? Kobe?
It crashed.
What the heck were we doing there? Well, that was the era, like, how none of us, like, I don't know. Like, we went out every single night. I don't even understand how we survived that.
Well, I mean, nothing follows up wine like sake, right?
Sake bomb from a bartender named Victor.
Yes, which all of this absolutely ties into branding, folks. Just stay with us. So I remember Darren calling them and saying, like, the servers crashed. It was, just crazy response. And we were talking through some of the wild card choices, and that's where Hush Puppies came in. And he was really all in on that. So we announced Hush Puppies as the wild card entrant. And boy, were people pissed. Like, they were excited because they're like, finally, these knuckleheads are giving us a chance. We can come up with a sensible name like Rapids. Right. And they gave us Hush Puppies.
You know what's really, like, looking back now in 2021, how many name suggestions we had that had something to do with a monument?
Yep, I was just about to say.
Or an old war, generals or whatever. And I still somewhere, we got to find these. I still have the stack. We printed out all the names, and I had the stack because the way we whittled it down was in my apartment. We had a draft. Remember this?
I do.
We had a draft, and each person on staff could stand up at a podium, and they could say, with the first name and the name of the team contest draft, I select. And I think each person did like 5 or 6.
Yep.
Alcohol was involved. Tom Denlinger. Tom Denlinger, if you listen to this, you know what happened that night.
Yeah. Now heading up the operation down in Augusta, Georgia. Yeah. Well, South Carolina, I guess, technically where the ballpark's at.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know why I started telling that story, but that was all part of it.
Whittling down the list.
Yeah, whittling down the list into that. But there was an uproar. But I don't recall it ever bothering us.
I think we knew it. We expected it. Well, I also think, though, we were also confident about what we were doing. Like, because we'd seen it work in other places. It was like,
Chucky had been involved.
We know.
Chucky had been involved in the Iron Pigs thing.
Right.
And Chuck Domino has an extra sense when it comes to this stuff. And, I think for me, at least, as someone, who was brought up in the business by Chucky, having him around was kind of like I was Linus and that was my security blanket, because whenever I did get nervous, he's like, what are you getting nervous for? It's going to work. And by the way, you're going to be the one talking to the TV cameras, not me, but, it's going to work. And we used to love it, man. You were with me. We'd walk into a bar and you'd hear people saying, who are those idiots that are bringing baseball back to Richmond? Those names are terrible. I wish they would go back. And then remember, we would send them a bunch of drinks over. Next thing you know, we walk out of there with 8 season tickets and a couple of picnics that we sold, and our best friends. And some people truly are people that we're friends with today.
So one of my favorite stories from that time, I remember sitting around the folding table that had then migrated into the conference room as the clubhouse was getting renovated. And we had the phone set up right in the middle of the table, and we'd all take turns answering it because every single call during that time was somebody calling to tell us how stupid we were and how terrible the name choices are, and please reconsider.
Silly was a word too. You guys are silly.
I heard stupid a lot and a little bit more than that. So this one lady calls. She's a very nice older lady, and she goes, I just have to tell you, I really don't like any of these names. Why would you name a baseball team any of these names? And I said, well, ma'am, we think they're fun. They're different. This is what we're trying to go for. She was like, I just don't think so. And I said, well, what would you like to name the team, ma'am? I tell you what I'd name the team. I'd call them the Richmond Beavers. And I said, wow, the Beavers. And just kind of playing along. Maybe a little loopy after the previous night. Wow, I didn't realize there were beavers in Richmond, Virginia. Oh, sure, they're all over. Where can I find a beaver, ma'am? Well, just go up and down the James. You'll see them all over the place. I mean, sometimes you had to have fun with it, right? Like, you just kind of had to play along. She's very nice. Out of all the people who told us how idiotic we were, like, she was very, very nice about it. And I mean, look, again, we kind of knew it was going to work. So before we get into Flying Squirrels and ultimately making that decision, you mentioned your affinity for the Rhinos. Mm-hmm. Was there another name that you remember from that time that you were like, wow, I really think this could work? I really think this would be a cool name.
I think we all felt like maybe Rockhoppers would work. It had the alliteration, Richmond Rockhoppers. It had the association with the Rocks and the James. There was a lot of things.
It's kind of open-ended, right?
Right, and you could have
gone a lot of different directions.
Could have been a lot of different things, which is why we liked the way the Flying Squirrels logo went. As I recall, though, there was a little bit of a situation with some company called Walt Disney that maybe had a...
So there was the movie Happy Feet.
Yeah.
With the penguins, and one of the penguins was nicknamed Rockhopper, which is something that you have to take into account when naming a team. I mean, the trademark, restrictions, perhaps, that's a real thing.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, we did the research, but we missed it, as I recall.
Well, that's why you have 5 choices, right? I mean, look, and that's why we dropped Ham Bones, because, I mean, there was some... people saw there was a reference to ethnic dances that slave owners would make slaves do on ships coming over. And look, as soon as that came out, said no, it's out.
Right.
You're not considering it. And look, you try, right? But there's some things that are going to slip through. But that's why you have multiple choices. Give yourself some options.
Yeah, and you can when you do a voting contest too. And we never said that it was going to be the highest vote. We just said we wanted the fans' feedback, and that helped us get the fans' feedback. And Flying Squirrels was either 1 or 2, I forget. But I think that's another smart thing is get the fans to give you their feedback by doing something like that. But you got to be ready. Like, you can't, like, you
ask for the opinion.
You can't, like I said, Flying Squirrels was 1 or 2. I can't remember which one. But if it was 5th out of 5, we would have been in tough shape, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think we all kind of felt like I liked rhinos, and I always used to bust Domino's chops about rhinos, and it was a thing with me and him. But I think Chucky really felt like Flying Squirrels was going to be the way to go from a very early point, and it was the right call. Like, so many people now come up to me and say, I hated the name when you announced it, but now I can't think of anything else that it should be other than Flying Squirrels. And that's amazing to come from that point where we were in 2010 to where we are today in 2021, when there's a generation of kids now that don't think it's that strange.
Right. It actually is really kind of a tame name now.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking to some of the other Mighty Muscles and Rumble Ponies and
the Otterbots,
right?
Down in Danville, and I was on a call with Austin, the guy that runs it, the other day. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but the Flying Squirrels gave those teams courage.
That's
right.
That's what I'm trying to say. You got it in my brain there for a second. Yeah.
Well,
it's
telepathy.
I got you. I think every time, like, our friend Brad Taylor, he graduated from Randolph-Macon right up the street. Great guy, longtime friend.
And now running the team out in El Paso, the Chihuahuas.
And he called and said, we're going to name our team the Chihuahuas. And I'm like, you mean the little, like, dogs that people like me, like, almost trip over and stuff? And he's like, yeah, I mean, the ones that go, rah, 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 rah. I go, yeah. I go, you're right next, like, there's a lot of things there, bud. And he's like, I know. Do you think we're going to get crap? And I said, 100% you're going to get crap. He goes, what do? I said, you commit. And once you commit, you don't turn back. And the noise of the first week is going to be gone by the end of the first year. And now the Chihuahuas are just an absolute rock solid organization in El Paso, Texas, that the whole community rallies around.
A community that lost baseball just like Richmond did, too,
Correct.
by the way.
There's a lot of scenarios. There's a lot of parallels there. And then like us,
except they got a brand spanking new ballpark, which is just a gem.
Yeah, well, we didn't yet. Even though some people told us we were going to get it. Yes, I'm staring in the camera for a reason right now. You know who you are, and someday we will talk about it. Anyway, but Brad and them down there took that name, the Chihuahuas, and became, like we did in Richmond, a centerpiece in the community so much that everything in El Paso revolves around the Chihuahuas.
And Chico, their mascot.
Yeah, all that. So, like, I think that you mentioned the word, maybe you didn't use the word versatility, but the name, the brand has to have the versatility to have multiple mascots, to have multiple logos. Like in our logo right here, I forget, we counted up one time. There's like 7 different logos that are taken out of the primary logo of the Flying Squirrels. And the primary logo looks like a map of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Which, do we want to tell them the truth?
I mean, we have been open and honest throughout this podcast, so we might as well.
So we were at a press conference, and somebody raised their hand, and they said, Parney, I think it's genius that your primary logo looks like the Commonwealth of Virginia, a map of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I forget who asked the question. It wasn't Johnny O.
Right.
I remember who it was. I just don't. But I remember looking at it and going, well, our friends at Brandiose did a lot of research into this. And as they were trying to come up with exactly how the Flying Squirrel would look, I'm sure that was, part of their thinking. Then I called them up and I'm like, yo, did you guys know? And we're like, oh, it does look like it. And we're like, oh, yeah, we knew that all the time.
Right.
We knew that all the time, So sometimes it's good to be lucky and sometimes it's good to be good,
Well, and I just remember, too, all of the back and forth with Brandiose, then Plan B with that logo design. I remember conversations about gussets.
Yeah.
We talked about press.
I was the big gusset guy.
You were a gusset guy?
I was all about the gussets.
I mean, it's worked out. I mean, that's how we, now that's extended into our Las Ardias Voladores brand with the mask and the luchador. Like, it all played into it. Right. It's crazy looking back now. To see how much it's become ingrained in the community, but then even just looking back in astonishment and amazement about the response from the community when we put merchandise on sale for the first time after unveiling the logo and the marks. I mean, it was unreal. Yeah. It was unreal to be able to go, here's the one thing I appreciate from a branding perspective. I mean, obviously for minor league teams, you got to get the kids. Kids have to love it, which they did. That was probably the low-hanging fruit. But what I appreciated, I remember one day seeing kids with Flying Squirrel shirts driving downtown Richmond. There was an older gentleman in his convertible Jeep that was wearing a Flying Squirrels hat. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I saw a kid with the Squirrels shirt on. Now I see this older gentleman in his convertible Jeep with the Squirrels hat on. And I remember going out to eat at lunch that day and seeing teenagers with Flying Squirrel shirts. And that is such a hard demographic to reach, because usually minor league baseball, stuff they do with their families, they become a little too cool for school and that kind of thing. But the Flying Squirrels, I think, resonated with that age range because it was different. It went against the grain. And people really loved, and especially that age range, loved the fact that it kind of signified being different, somewhat rebellious, and going against tradition, which was, I thought, kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how you need to cast a wide net.
Right.
Right? You got to have something for everybody. I think that's the philosophy of even running a good game day operation. What's mom going to like? What's dad going to like? What are kids going to like? What's grandpa and grandma going to like? And we hit somehow, some way on a lot of those things so that maybe Grandpa wanted to wear it because he did think it looked like the Commonwealth of Virginia. He's born and raised in Virginia. Maybe Grandma liked the red colors or something. I mean, I think we did a good job, and I think the guys at Grandiose get a lot of credit for this, of making sure that we went right up to the edge of the cliff without falling off the cliff, and then casting a net out into the ocean that spread out as far as it could to catch as many fish as possible. And then also the longevity of this. Like, we're still in the top 25 of merchandise sales 11 years later. We've had a little bit of dip in some years, but, with the All-Star year in 2019, boom, that crashes right back up there. So, I think to continue to change, and now, of course, we have the legendary Nick Elder here.
Our creative services manager.
Who continually changes the way that our things look and the things that...
Hold that thought. Okay. I do have a question about that.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
Before we talk a little bit more about where the Flying Squirrels go from here as we near the end of another episode, I think looking at it now, Flying Squirrels seems obvious, right? Like, why wouldn't you have named it the Flying Squirrels? Back then, was it an obvious choice to you?
No. I mean, I liked it. But I like rhinos.
I mean, I'll be honest, I was kind of lukewarm on it. I was like, I mean, yeah, I could kind of see it, but I was starting to buy into the idea of rockhoppers. Like, oh, yeah, it's a little more
rhinos?
Nebulous.
Why do you like rhinos?
Well, if you remember the first time we did a What If night, our friend Greg Coleman in Erie actually started this when he was in Bowling Green. One of their name the team choices.
Coley, you're the man.
Before they ended up naming the team the Hot Rods, one of their choices was the Cave Shrimp.
Yeah.
And so they did a What If night with
Cave Shrimp. Is that such a thing, by the way? A Cave Shrimp?
I think so. Evidently.
Delicious.
Yeah. But one of the first teams that we did the What If night for was the Rhinos. So we did actually have the Rhinos, and we still have the trademarks to that Richmond Rhinos logo. So
we have to do the t-shirt.
Nick Elder wants to name a hockey team the Richmond Rhinos. Okay, maybe we'll be able to resurrect that logo at some point. But okay, so you're all team Rhinos.
Instead of a hat trick, you could like put everybody has a horn, and then when you score a hat trick, you throw the horn on the ice.
Your tagline's even more alliterative with hockey instead of baseball, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what did you ask me?
So it wasn't necessarily the most obvious choice to you.
No, I don't think so. Domino deserves a lot of credit. He really rode the Flying Squirrels hard, and he
after Rockhoppers, because I really thought that's the way we were going, because Chuck originally really lit up with Rockhoppers. Yeah. And then we found out.
Then there was a little thing.
The mouse had the reins on that one.
Rat.
Yep.
Mouse is a rat. But no, that's just the thing about branding is whatever you decide, you have to really believe in it, because retreating is hard and retreating is costly. And so you really have to believe in it. And I feel like we believed in it and had the courage and really lived it so that other people bought into it as well. I don't think we gave them much room to not like it.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you argue with the first day you put merchandise on sale, people lined up down the block to wait to get into the store?
Well, I think that's where I always kind of felt like even the pushback that we got from the name of the team, I always felt like just wait till you see the logo.
Right.
Just wait till you see it.
Right.
Like when you see it all together, and then when we unveiled the jerseys, and then when we unveiled Nutsy, like I think
by
really.
By the time we got to opening night, nobody was complaining anymore.
Well, and by the time we unveiled once people saw the jerseys and Nutsy, they were like, okay. We get it.
Right.
Like we see it now. Like it's not a like joke of a name. Right. It's not like, oh, these are professional athletes and they're going to look like, you're going to look silly wearing Flying Squirrels. Like this wasn't.
Well, that 2010 team loved it. I mean, they loved Brandon Crawford, Brandon Bell, all those guys.
I remember Lane Castellani when he went out to Scottsdale to talk to them. He was like, "What do you think of the name?" And they all did say, "Yeah." Some of them were like, "Oh, it's interesting, but could be cool."
Yeah, proud to be a squirrel. I remember him saying, and so I think that's all part of it too, right? Like, I think anything in life, when you live it, it's about the way you respond to it. If you're not confident on an athletic field, you're going to get your lunch handed to you. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with branding. If you come in and you're confident about your brand, I mean, like, would everybody wear the pants that I wear and walk around and not worry about what people? No, I walk into a room and I don't. I mean, it is what it is. If you want to make fun of me, make fun of me. If not, but this is my brand, and my brand works in Richmond, Virginia. And that's just the way it is. And that's all part of the swagger, right? And I think we had that swagger. We had that swagger, and that was fun. I mean, that was really fun. Yeah. And to kind of change an entire community's mind about something. Mm-hmm. But I think the third thing that we made the logo impactful. Like, we took the logo, we took the brand, but we made it active in the community and made it meaningful to the lives of families through charity work and other things. And I think that was a critical thing too. Like, you can't just have a brand and let it lay there. Right. You got to take the brand and you got to make it worthwhile in the community.
Yeah, activate it.
Like you said, BT down in El Paso. They've taken that Chihuahuas brand and they've made it impactful in the community. I think that is a critical part, whether you're a baseball team, an insurance agency, you take your brand for your company, your physical brand, your tangible brand, your intangible brand, and you take that out into the community and you make a difference, and then that's going to make a difference in your brand. Woo, getting a little preachy. Getting on the soapbox.
Well, we're probably going to have to run here in just a second, big guy. But
yeah, because the chaos continues outside. There's players that want me on a Zoom so they can talk to me about getting to Richmond, Virginia. We just dated this podcast.
It's all right. It'll still be evergreen. So before I let you go, before we wrap this up, where's the Flying Squirrels brand go from here to avoid getting that nasty S word that you don't like? Stale. Yeah. Stale.
So Anthony's one of the people that know that if he ever wants to sway my opinion on anything, all he's got to do is stand in that doorway over there and go, "Big guy, got a sec? I think that this is stale. What we're doing is stale, and I wanted you to consider." No, just do it. If you think it's stale, just not okay. I hate the word stale. I hate the word stale. I hate getting stale. I hate things being stale. I think we got some really talented people like yourself in the creative corner, Caroline, Bailey, Nick. I don't want to leave anybody out. Like, our whole front office staff continually tries to challenge each other to change and stimulate the community with our brand. It's not just all about the physical brand, the intangible brand too. And I think as long as we continue to be impactful in the community 12 months out of the year, this brand is never going to get stale. Well, and a new ballpark would help too for anyone listening out there. That would be nice.
A lot of teams a decade plus in, may be looking at like retooling the logo, retooling the uniforms. Could you ever see a day in the near future, like let's say that new ballpark does open up in 2024? Could you see the Flying Squirrels taking the field in different uniforms? You see a different look to the Flying Squirrels when that happens?
I mean, I think there could be a different look. I don't see the name ever changing.
Right. But I'm talking about like the logo design.
Well, it depends on what you and Nick want to do. I don't know. I'm just a CEO. I'm a figurehead. I'm just sitting in there, drinking coffee. I mean, I don't think you would ever. To me, the connectivity of the logo's been great, but the name is where people actually went from hating it to being connected to it. I think changing the name of the team would be way more over-the-top controversial than changing like a uniform look or even a primary logo look. I think when we get to the new ballpark, we're, of course, going to utilize that opportunity for some change. So,
freshen things up.
So maybe, because I can promise you this, we're not going to go to a new ballpark and be stale.
Right.
We don't want to be stale in an old ballpark, that is stale. We've made this old ballpark not stale for years now. So I think anything's up, but after I die, y'all might want to change the name. I don't know, but I don't think so.
Well, and that's one of the things I do love about that's happened with having someone such as Nick, who has the ability of doing some different graphic design elements, is we're really starting to explore the other possibilities with Flying Squirrels, reimagining the Flying Squirrels brand. So we're still the Flying Squirrels, but with like Las Ardillas Voladoras, we're able to give it a different look, some different colors, a different theme. We were exploring things with this rocket squirrel concept. We're doing a faux back.
It just keeps it fresh.
Look, it does.
The faux back look, merchandise-wise, you see that all over the place. You see that.
And they haven't even played a game yet with that.
And you see that in a lot of young kids, to your point of like the people that like it. And, when we had the Richmond Virginians throwback day, like I saw people of all ages. Our players would wear the Virginians hat outside of the locker room and wear it home. Which I've never seen that before in my career. If you wear a hat for a game, you leave it in your locker. These guys like those hats so much they'll wear it home. So, I mean, we definitely we're on to something here. But what I love about us is we're never satisfied, so we'll never let it get the S word. And so, I like your phrase reimagine. Do I think it would ever change it wholly? Certainly not the name, but I think there's some reimagination that can go on in the years to come.
Oh, boy, that's something to stick around for, and a little bit of cliffhanger. Don't know what's coming your way.
I mean, I don't know what reimagination means because that's like a 7-syllable word, reimagination. That's a lot for North Carolina public school system.
Well, big guy, we've been at it for a hot second, so I think it's time to get back to work, but enjoyed the time as always.
Chaos, here we come.
And until next time, have fun.
Go nuts. Have fun, go nuts.